Have you ever looked at the people around you, the very people you call family, and wondered if all is truly well? Sometimes the greatest storms do not come from strangers, but from the hidden corners of your own household. There are forces that operate silently, subtly, yet profoundly. And if you are not careful, they can shape the course of your life without you ever realizing it. Today, I want to speak to you about something very serious, something that many people shy away from, but it is essential that you know there are signs, 7 specific signs that can help you identify a witch or a wizard within your own family. First, pay attention to manipulation. This is subtle but very telling. A witch or a wizard knows how to operate through influence. They do not always hit you with direct aggression. No, they prefer subtle control, steering family decisions, creating conflict, or orchestrating situations that always favor their own hidden agenda. If you notice a pattern where certain family members always seem to pull the strings, always know how to get their way, even at the expense of harmony, then you must pay attention. Spiritual forces behind them can be very strategic. They don't just act, they plan. Second, watch for secrecy. This is one of the most important indicators. A person who is deeply involved in occult practices will guard their activities jealously. They may avoid sharing details about their personal life, disappear for long hours without explanation, or become defensive when questioned about their actions. Secrecy is the shadow behind which dark intentions thrive. And I tell you, if you begin to notice that someone in your family has built walls around themselves that even love cannot penetrate, it is a red flag. Darkness always seeks a hidden chamber. Third, look at the way they relate to spiritual matters. I am not talking about casual disbelief or skepticism. I am talking about an unusual preoccupation with spiritual power, but in ways that bring fear, division, or manipulation. Some will carry strange charms, obsess over talismans, or have unusual interest in astrology, rituals, or mysterious objects. They may even perform actions that are not just eccentric, but have a spiritual undertone. And I warn you, those who tamper with powers beyond human understanding often leave a trail of unrest and strife in their wake. The fourth sign is the pattern of bringing misfortune. Watch carefully. Life is not always predictable, but there are patterns, and a witch or wizard tends to be associated with repeated crises, financial ruin, sickness, accidents, or emotional breakdowns that seem to revolve around their presence or influence. You might notice that whenever a particular person is involved in a family decision, things go wrong. It is subtle but consistent. The spirit of manipulation works through disruption. Fifth, observe emotional coldness or cruelty. Now, I am not speaking of someone who simply makes mistakes or has a rough temperament. I am talking about a distinct absence of compassion, empathy, or love when it is most required. There may be moments where love should bind a family together, but instead there is deliberate provocation, resentment, or hostility. A witch or wizard may not always show overt violence, but their presence can create fear, guilt, or oppression that is difficult to explain. The sixth sign is dominance over family secrets and generational control. Pay attention to patterns that repeat across generations. Witches and wizards often operate within family lines. They inherit patterns, habits, and behaviors that perpetuate control or harm. You may notice certain rituals, words, or even attitudes passed from one generation to another that defy explanation. These are often the fingerprints of spiritual manipulation embedded in the family structure. Understanding generational influence is key to identifying hidden forces at work. And finally, the seventh sign is an uncanny influence over others. A person involved in occult practices can attract followers, influence others to act against their own best interests, or create division without logical reason. This influence is often spiritual in nature. They can sway decisions, corrupt relationships, and lead family members into choices that appear normal on the surface, but are spiritually damaging. It is subtle, deceptive, and often disguised as charisma or wisdom, Now, I want you to understand something crucial. The presence of one sign alone does not necessarily indicate involvement in witchcraft. But when several of these signs converge in one individual, you must wake up to reality. Spiritual blindness is one of the greatest dangers in family life. Many people are living under spiritual attacks orchestrated by those closest to them without ever realizing it. The challenge, however, is not merely identifying these signs. Knowledge alone is not enough. It is what you do with that knowledge that determines your freedom. The first step is awareness. Awareness is spiritual vision. If you cannot see, you cannot protect. Once you see, you must take steps to protect your household, your mind, and your destiny. Prayer, discernment, fasting, and seeking divine counsel are not optional. They are necessary. There are spiritual doors in every family, and some doors must be closed before they wreak havoc. Another essential step is boundaries. Spiritual warfare is not just about casting out. It's about discerning and drawing lines that protect the innocent. You must create boundaries that safeguard your life, your family, and your future from the influence of those who operate in darkness. Ignoring the signs is like leaving your house open in a storm. You must remember that the power of God is greater than any scheme of darkness. You are not helpless. The moment you recognize the signs and align yourself with the truth, you gain authority over your environment. You can pray with boldness, discern with clarity, and act with wisdom. Your family can be protected. Generational curses can be broken. Spiritual attacks can be neutralized. And all this begins when you refuse to remain blind. So, I urge you today, observe, discern, and act. The signs are there. They have been there. The question is, will you see them before it is too late? Will you allow love and vigilance to coexist with spiritual awareness? The family is a sacred institution, but it is also a battlefield. The closer the enemy gets to your foundation, the more dangerous the consequences. Do not be deceived. Do not be complacent. Take the time to discern, pray, and safeguard what is precious. Your awareness, your vigilance, and your spiritual alignment can make the difference between freedom and captivity, blessing and disaster, life and destruction. Recognize the signs, act in wisdom, protect your destiny. Your family, your home, and your future depend on it. You see, the challenge is that many times the signs are subtle. They manifest in whispers, in the quiet corners of your home, in things you may dismiss as coincidence or temperament. But the Spirit is always speaking, and He gives discernment to those who are willing to see. You cannot afford to ignore the small things. A word here, a gesture there, a repeated pattern. These are not accidents. They are indicators, spiritual markers, pointing to truths that the natural eye may not see, but the spiritual eye can. Notice how some individuals in your family have an uncanny ability to attract conflict or thrive in chaos. While others are seeking peace and harmony, they seem drawn to disruption. This is not simply a matter of personality. It is the working of a force that operates beyond what is natural. It is subtle but persistent. And often those under this influence may not even recognize it themselves, for the darkness has a way of blinding the participant while manipulating the environment around them. Then there are the emotional manipulations, the ways in which guilt, shame, or fear are wielded to control or silence others. You may notice a family member consistently twisting situations, making you question your own perception or morality. This is classic because witchcraft and occult practices often work through the distortion of truth, creating confusion so that spiritual blindness can flourish. Be vigilant when you feel a sense of unease in interactions. Spiritual deception rarely operates in plain sight. Another critical aspect is the strange fascination with death, the dead, or unexplained phenomena. It may manifest as an unusual preoccupation with the supernatural in a way that is not innocent curiosity, but a gateway to manipulation. While children may be curious about the unknown, adults entrenched in occult influence often display behaviors that are calculated and repetitive, opening doors to realms that are not meant to be accessed by man. Watch how wealth, success, and opportunity are handled in the household. Some individuals may seem to control the flow of resources, but not merely for themselves. They may strategically hinder the progress of others through subtle means. You may notice repeated patterns where blessings are delayed, opportunities are mysteriously blocked, or relationships are strained without clear cause. When spiritual forces are at play, they operate quietly but effectively, influencing outcomes in ways that often appear coincidental but are, in reality, orchestrated. Observe health patterns as well. Frequent illness, accidents, or inexplicable fatigue around certain family members can sometimes point to spiritual interference. While not every ailment is a result of witchcraft, the spirit can reveal when patterns of harm are deliberate rather than natural. Awareness of these patterns allows you to take preventative spiritual measures to shield your life and to seek divine guidance before crises escalate. And the final element to continuously monitor is the influence over children or vulnerable family members. Darkness often seeks to shape the next generation, to create avenues through which control, manipulation, or spiritual dominance can continue. If you see young ones being subtly swayed into behaviors, fears, or beliefs that cause division, rebellion, or confusion, you must take heed. Children are highly perceptive, and spiritual interference often manifests first in the most innocent hearts, shaping the future without detection. You must understand that spiritual vigilance is a lifestyle. It is not something you engage in only when trouble arises. You live with awareness, prayer, and discernment as your companions every day. Spiritual blindness is costly. Complacency is dangerous. The unseen world operates continuously, and it is your responsibility to guard your home, your family, and your mind from infiltration. Every interaction, every decision, every family gathering is an opportunity for either blessing or manipulation. Recognize the atmosphere, listen to the spirit, and allow divine discernment to guide your observations. Remember, those who operate in darkness are not always loud. Often, they are silent, strategic, and patient. The key is to see patterns where others see randomness, to hear whispers where others hear noise, and to act in wisdom before the consequences manifest fully. The spiritual reality of your household cannot be ignored. This is why you must remain awake, aware, and spiritually sensitive. The moment you allow routine, distraction, or ignorance to dominate, you give the enemy an open door. It is not enough to rely on intuition alone. You must cultivate spiritual perception, align with divine truth, and continuously seek revelation for every situation that affects your family. Notice also how ambition and influence are wielded. Some family members may always seem to know how to position themselves to gain power, yet it is not always for the good of the household. There is a subtle, almost invisible hand guiding decisions, shaping perceptions, and ensuring outcomes that serve a hidden agenda. The natural mind may praise their wisdom, but the spiritual eye discerns the underlying manipulation. True discernment sees beyond the smile, the charm, and the clever words to the spiritual currents beneath. Pay attention to how they respond to accountability. A witch or wizard will resist correction, often deflecting blame or making themselves the victim when confronted. They avoid accountability like the night avoids the sun. Every family has moments of tension and correction, but when a pattern of deflection, secrecy, or aggression in response to accountability emerges, it is a sign that spiritual darkness is operating. This resistance is not just stubbornness, it is spiritual protection of their hidden practices. Then there is the issue of relationships within the family. Watch for consistent sabotage of connections, siblings turning against each other, marriages destabilized, trust eroded. The enemy uses those who walk in darkness to fracture unity. If you notice patterns of broken trust or unexplained conflicts surrounding certain individuals, it may be more than mere coincidence. Spiritual forces often operate in cycles, and the chaos they create leaves a trail of confusion, emotional trauma, and delayed progress. Look at the objects and tools they hold dear. Items that seem ordinary may be spiritually charged. Charms, amulets, unusual symbols, or even repeated rituals that are treated with secrecy can open doors to manipulation. Objects in themselves are not always dangerous, but in the hands of one operating in occult practices, they become instruments of influence. Watch what is valued, revered, or protected, for it often points to the source of spiritual activity. Observe the patterns of speech. Words have power, and those involved in witchcraft or occult activity often speak in ways that manipulate perception, instill fear, or subtly shift beliefs. Pay attention to repeated phrases, warnings, or advice that always steer the family toward confusion or dependence. The words may appear casual, but spiritually they are loaded. They are not idle. They are strategically placed to shape thoughts, emotions, and decisions. You will also notice tendencies toward isolation. A family member involved in occult practices may prefer secrecy, not only in actions, but in emotional life. They isolate themselves, drawing away from community, spiritual counsel, and open accountability. Isolation is a tool of spiritual influence, creating a space where manipulation can thrive without challenge. When someone repeatedly avoids guidance, retreats from family discussion, or refuses counsel in critical areas, take careful note. Observe the spiritual climate of the home. Even if all appears well outwardly, there may be a heaviness, tension, or fear that lingers. The presence of darkness can affect the atmosphere, subtly influencing moods, conversations, and relationships. The home is a sacred space, and when the Spirit of God is not fully allowed to dominate, unseen forces can create unrest. Those who operate in occult practices often leave an invisible imprint on the family environment, a spiritual shadow that affects everyone. Spiritual discernment is not just about seeing evil. It is about understanding patterns, interpreting behaviors, and positioning yourself to act with wisdom. Every sign, every indicator, every subtle disturbance is a signal, a warning from God that you must not ignore. The enemy is strategic. He does not reveal his plan in its entirety, but if you're attentive, you will see pieces of it through the actions, words, and influence of those around you. You must cultivate sensitivity. Sensitivity is the ability to detect the unseen, the capacity to hear the whisper of the Spirit above the noise of the world. It is what allows you to distinguish between natural circumstances and spiritual interference. And sensitivity requires discipline, regular prayer, meditation on God's word, and a lifestyle that refuses compromise with darkness. Without it, the signs may pass unnoticed, the patterns misunderstood, and the opportunities for intervention lost. Notice also the way they respond to blessings. Sometimes those involved in occult activity react with envy, manipulation, or subtle sabotage when others receive favor, success, or divine increase. Blessings that should bring unity may instead provoke tension, subtle attacks, or obstruction. Spiritual insight helps you discern whether opposition is natural or orchestrated by hidden forces. The key is observation over time. Patterns reveal themselves. Isolated incidents are not enough to make a conclusion, but consistent repetition, combined with multiple indicators, paints a clear picture. Spiritual warfare is never a one-time event. It is ongoing, and so is discernment. You must be patient, alert, and committed to perceiving the truth of what operates beyond the natural eye. Pay close attention to patterns of deception. Those under occult influence have a way of twisting truth without appearing dishonest. They create confusion, shift narratives, and make the innocent question themselves. This is not always loud or dramatic. It is subtle, methodical, and spiritual. Lies are rarely obvious. They are carefully layered between truth, half-truths, and persuasion. The Spirit of God grants discernment to see through these layers, but you must cultivate the patience to observe, analyze, and act when necessary. Observe their influence over resources, not just financial, but also knowledge, opportunity, and connections. Often, those who walk in occult practices manipulate access to what should be freely available within the family. They create dependency, ensuring that others cannot progress without indirect approval or assistance. This is spiritual leverage. Those who are blind to it may continue to give away authority over their own lives unknowingly. Awareness breaks that cycle. Watch for alliances that seem unnatural. There may be friendships, partnerships, or connections outside the home that exert an unusual influence over the family. Some people operate in the darkness with networks designed to perpetuate control and manipulation. Spiritual insight reveals these alliances not just as social interactions, but as part of a larger pattern of influence. You may feel uneasy or sense that something is off. Never dismiss that feeling. It is often the Spirit's way of drawing your attention. Notice their response to prayer or spiritual counsel. A family member involved in occult practices often resists spiritual intervention. They may mock, dismiss, or redirect efforts meant to invoke blessing and protection. This resistance is a strong signal. Darkness does not welcome light. Where there is resistance to spiritual truth and divine intervention, there is often a hidden agenda operating under a veil of normalcy. Pay attention to unexplained delays in family progress. Projects, businesses, or personal goals that repeatedly stall without clear reason may be affected by spiritual interference. A pattern of disruption, small at first, then persistent, is often an indication that the forces of darkness are actively operating to hinder blessing. Those who walk in discernment do not ignore delays. They pray, investigate, and align with divine wisdom to remove obstacles. Observe behavior around rituals and traditions. Some may elevate particular practices, insisting on repeated observances that seem innocent but carry hidden spiritual significance. These practices often serve as conduits of influence, subtly shaping attitudes, perceptions, and allegiances. It is the repeated, almost ritualistic behavior combined with secrecy that signals spiritual manipulation. Look at their emotional impact on others. Even without overt malice, some family members consistently create tension, fear, or guilt. Their presence may cause anxiety, insecurity, or a sense of being watched. This is often the work of unseen forces influencing human behavior to achieve control. It is subtle but powerful. Emotional disturbance is one of the hallmarks of hidden spiritual influence. Observe how they interact with authority. A witch or wizard often resists legitimate authority, whether in the home, community, or spiritual setting. This is not mere rebellion. It is a spiritual principle. Darkness resists order, structure, and alignment with God's plan. If you notice repeated patterns of undermining, manipulation, or subversion, it is not always about personality. It may be about a spiritual agenda operating beneath the surface. Pay attention to their fascination with secrets. Some individuals value secrecy above all else, whether it is hiding possessions, hiding actions, or hiding relationships. Secrets are the soil in which darkness grows. When secrecy becomes a defining trait, it is a signal to engage spiritual insight. Those who walk in discernment understand that exposure and light are weapons against manipulation. Notice the subtle influence over decision-making. A family member may steer choices in ways that benefit themselves at the expense of others. This is not always obvious, and it often hides behind reason, logic, or charm. Yet, patterns emerge over time, revealing manipulation. Spiritual discernment helps you see beyond appearances to the forces shaping outcomes behind the scenes. Watch their influence on generational patterns. Behaviors, beliefs, or practices passed from one generation to another often carry spiritual weight. When you notice patterns of harm, dysfunction, or recurring misfortune linked to particular individuals, it is not merely genetics or coincidence. It can be the work of unseen forces influencing family dynamics over time. Beloved, the time for spiritual blindness is over. The enemy does not knock politely at the door of your family. He seeks to infiltrate silently, to manipulate, to destroy, and to steal the blessings God has ordained for you. The signs I have shared with you are not meant to frighten you. They are meant to awaken you, to sharpen your spiritual vision, and to equip you to act with wisdom and authority. You must understand this. Awareness without action is incomplete. Knowing the signs of darkness is only the first step. The true power lies in vigilance, in prayer, in discernment, and in the courage to close every door that allows evil to operate within your home. Spiritual warfare is not passive. It demands boldness. It requires you to rise, to protect your household, to reclaim every blessing that belongs to you, and to establish peace, prosperity, and divine order. Remember this truth. No witch, no wizard, no dark force has power over the life of a child of God unless you allow it. The authority of the Spirit is greater than every scheme of darkness. Stand firm in the knowledge that you are not helpless. You have the ability to discern, to act, and to break every chain that threatens your family. Do not delay. Do not rationalize. Do not ignore the warnings. Pray, seek divine wisdom, set boundaries, and operate in obedience to God. The future of your family, your destiny, and the generations to come depend on what you choose to do today. Rise up in spiritual vigilance, walk in wisdom, and let no darkness define your home. The Lord has given you eyes to see, ears to hear, and a spirit to discern. Use them. Protect your family. Guard your destiny. Close every door the enemy has been trying to open, and let the light of God shine fully in your household.